Welcome back in, guys, to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on Friday, September the 6th, to close out the week. What a game we had last night to officially start the NFL regular season. We're going to talk about everything that happened, my thoughts, my takeaways, previewing a little bit of the game tonight between the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles down in Brazil, and also answering a big question that I think a lot of people have on their mind after last night is whether or not this loss to the Kansas City Chiefs yet again solely falls on Lamar, or again, is it more of a team-viewed issue? Those questions will be answered on today's show, plus a couple more previews that we have talking about Dak and also picking the winners of the rest of the games in week one. All of that is coming up on today's show. Make sure to stick around to watch that. But before we get started talking about the game last night, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions regarding anything now that we are fully back into the swing of things in the NFL, if you have a question, a comment, an opinion you'd like to share on anything we talk about on today's show, please make sure to share it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we always appreciate your guys' insights on anything you want to comment about. And now, if you want to make that absolutely sure and guaranteed that your message gets on the air and featured on our show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the Super Chat feature that we have available for you guys now. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, but also it's a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, don't hesitate to use that Super Chat button and let us know what you guys are thinking. But also, there is still the alternative option, the old Timid Donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. If you do prefer to use that to leave a comment or a question with that method as well. We couldn't do what we do on this channel without your amazing support, and we're always so thankful for you guys when you guys are active and interactive with our shows and also helping us out as well. But now we could talk about last night's game. A lot went down in that game. I think we could pick out a bunch of different storylines, questions going forward, and impact off of this game, right? It was a perfect start to the 2024 regular season. If anything, if we can pick out anything from this game, and if this is any indication of what this season is going to look like, we're in store for a great, awesome year, right? Just based off of last night's game. Ultimately, the Chiefs did survive a late comeback attempt from the Baltimore Ravens to win out that game 27-20. Reading out some of the big performers from last night's game, you obviously have Lamar Jackson, 273 passing yards, 122 rushing yards, nearly 400 yards of total offense for Lamar, one touchdown as well. Derrick Henry, their big addition to their backfield in Baltimore, he had 13 carries, 46 yards, and one touchdown as well. Then you look at one of the breakout stars, I would say, Isaiah Likely, again on the Ravens side, 9 receptions for 111 yards on 12 targets, a touchdown as well for him, and he followed that alongside Zay Flowers, who was also very active, but the stats might not reflect it. 6 receptions, 37 yards on 10 targets. And I mentioned the targets for these two guys because it was interesting, and it will play out to the point I'm trying to make later on with this preview. But Isaiah Likely got 12 targets, Zay Flowers got 10 targets, and also Justice Hill, their running back, was the only other player to at least get 8 targets in the passing game. Everybody else had around 5 or less for the Ravens, so that's something I will point out a little bit later. Then on the Chiefs side of things, Patrick Mahomes, almost 300 yards in passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception in yesterday's game. Rashee Rice, not a breakout star considering the form that he was on to end the year last year. He had 7 receptions, 103 yards, no touchdown for him. And the real breakout star, I think, for the Chiefs that really made a name for himself and what he is going to bring for the Chiefs offense. You look at Xavier Worthy, 2 receptions last night, 1 carry, 47 pass or receiving yards to his name, 21 rushing yards, and 2 total touchdowns for the rookie wide receiver out of Texas. And that's a lot to break down there. A lot of standout performances from last night's game, and that's why we got such a back and forth crazy game, especially the way it ended. And addressing that point on how it ended, Isaiah Likely catching that touchdown in the back of the end zone, but the tip of his shoe, the sole basically of his foot, was stepping out of bounds. And I honestly thought, when I looked at it in real time before they started zooming in, I thought they were still going to call it a touchdown. I just felt that, there's close measurements on what's out and what's not out, but then there's something like that where you couldn't get a smaller margin of his shoe to be out of bounds to still call it out of bounds. I thought it was so small of a margin that they were just going to let it go and call it a touchdown anyway. The Ravens obviously felt the same way. Lamar Jackson saying afterwards that he thought it was a touchdown, and he's going to still keep believing that it was a touchdown. But if I was to make a decision on it, I think they made the right call, because you'd rather be playing it safe in that situation rather than always having that doubt in there. I think most people would see that, there is a little bit of that part of his cleat stepping out of bounds. So ultimately, it was the correct call, but it was a very devastating call, right? As time winds down, Lamar somehow finds Isaiah Likely in that situation, and he makes a perfect throw. Isaiah catches it perfectly, there's no question about that, but it's just the feet. The last thing that the receivers need. Unfortunately for the Ravens, it was out of bounds. The game ends there. And very salty responses, very salty faces on all the Ravens players, if you guys watched the game as well last night. But on that note, on the last play by Isaiah Likely, the takeaways that I took from that, just off of that last action and just basically overall in the game, was that it really shouldn't have been too close, honestly. We're talking about a play in the end of a game where I honestly didn't feel like it should have been that close, based on the fact that the Chiefs had an opportunity there to score what most think would have been a touchdown, with Isaiah Pacheco running pretty freely up the right sideline, but he just dropped the pass. There was another pass that Juju Smith-Schuster dropped on the goal line as he was making his way down. That was probably going to be another touchdown, and this could have been a 30-something game to 20 points that the Ravens had in the end. And when you look at that margin, if the Chiefs execute on all these plays, you could say the same for the Ravens executing on some throws that Lamar might have missed as well. We'll get into that later on in the show, but it really didn't seem that close to me, just because, as we predicted, or as I talked about on yesterday's show, it just looked like the Chiefs have less to figure out. They have less to figure out, and more so trying to enhance what they already have, right? They know all their pieces. They know how they sort of fit. It's just a matter of execution with them at this point of the season. In the first game, they're just trying to execute everything a little bit better. Whereas with the Ravens, a big takeaway that I had from them also was that, similarly to the Chiefs, they have a lot of new pieces. Obviously, 3 new offensive linemen, some new pieces on the defensive side of the ball, and to them, it looks like they're still figuring everything out. With Derrick Henry, like we mentioned, he was probably one of the more underwhelming performers from last night, 13 carries and 46 yards, like I said. And it just seems like they still don't know when to use Derrick Henry, and what seems appropriate to, be patient enough to still use Derrick Henry, right? Because at the beginning of the game, that first drive, they convert on a bunch of third downs. Derrick, once they get into the red zone, they use Derrick a couple more times. They get close enough, Derrick dives into the end zone, and they score. It looks awesome, right? It looks like Derrick is going to fit in very nicely, and I think he will eventually. But with this team, as the game went on, and as the Chiefs, responded, they started, picking up some steam. You head into the second half, and it just looked like the Ravens got a little bit antsy, like almost like Derrick Henry wouldn't serve them too much of a purpose while they're trailing, if that makes sense. It sounds crazy to say, but the way that they executed in the second half, the way that they deployed Derrick Henry in the second half, they didn't really use him that much, I think, in an effort to obviously come back, right? But I think at that point in the second half where they weren't really using Derrick, it was still very early to sort of give up on the run game, but we kind of saw it back in the AFC Championship game as well, where the Ravens just tried too quickly to play their card and try too quickly to get back into this game, where I think slowing the pace down a little bit, slowing any momentum that the Chiefs could have had, would have served them a little bit better, and Derrick, I think, would have served that purpose some more. And you have that piled up with the fact that Lamar also had a big game with his legs, and I think that really, is great. It is exciting. It's a great thing to have if you're Lamar and you're the Ravens, right? But running that much is great. Having all these design runs is great, right? But to me, it also signals the fact that they're not really getting too open on the outside. Or it's either that or Lamar, there's a problem with the execution of some of these throws. And I don't think that's the case, because I like the progression Lamar has made over the course of his career passing-wise. But it's either that or they're just not getting open, and that's why I mentioned the targets before, right? Isaiah Likely and Zay Flowers basically were the only guys that were consistently becoming an option for Lamar. Justice Hill as well coming out of the backfield. It signals also to what I just said about Derrick Henry. So that's something else that stood out to me in terms of these takeaways with this team. They have to still figure how everybody's going to fit, when and where and how to use Derrick Henry as well, how it fits with their offense, how to play it off of Lamar and his running ability. It's all there right now, but it's all sort of just piled up in a big mess right now. They kind of have to mold it and shape it out to how they want to execute it. And it's obviously way before anything really, truly, matters in terms of playoffs or anything like that. But of course, you're left sour not winning this game. You felt like you had a great chance to win this game. But in terms of the Chiefs, and I won't really mention too much because I think it shows exactly who we thought the Chiefs were, right? The offense looks way better than it did last year, and we knew that coming in. And they didn't even have Marquise Brown. Just wait until he shows up and plays alongside Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and Travis Kelce. You hardly really heard his name throughout the game, but that is all right now. It seems like you don't necessarily need Travis to have 7 catches for 90-something yards each game. He more so needs to just pick his spots. They had it on a big third down conversion where Travis Kelce got open. Having him more in that role, appearing when Patrick is scrambling and they have that great connection, that's all right now, because you have all these great young receivers around this Kansas City offense that I think just reaffirms what we had believed going into this game. And it's looking like it's hard to pick out something bad to say about the Chiefs, honestly, because the defense stood out as well. They played very well. The offensive line for the Ravens is something else they need to figure out, like I said, like much of the other things. But regardless of that, with all the questions and doubts that we had about the Ravens, it was still a great game, a fantastic finish to the opening game of the NFL regular season, and I don't think we could have asked for much more. The drama, the back and forth and everything, the controversy, it was all wrapped up into one game last night, and it was very exciting to follow that up with a game tonight. It's going to be hard to do, but we're going to keep our hopes up in that. We're going to preview the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles coming up, but before that, I had a question to bring up as well. Just off the bat of this game, we're not going to leave this topic just yet. We're going to answer the question whether or not Lamar should take most of the blame for last night's loss, or is it more on the Ravens for the penalties, the execution, and things like that. We're going to answer that question right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue on talking from the last segment on the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens game from last night. The Chiefs squeaking out with a win there. 27-20 was the final score, but 27-20 obviously alludes to the fact that it was a close game, and if you did miss out the ending of that game because you thought the Chiefs were just going to wrap everything up, you certainly missed a great ending to that game. Just in all, wrapping it up in the final three chances, basically starting from there and talking about it, that Lamar Jackson had at the end of the game, that the Ravens had at the end of the game, right? Talking about this idea towards the end of the game, you know, you have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Lamar Jackson, and the ending of this game is going to draw a lot of headlines, right? Obviously, because that's when the game could have been at least tied or potentially won, because after, you know, what we thought was going to be called a touchdown with Isaiah Likely catching it in the back of the end zone, John Harbaugh was sort of signaling like they were going to go for 2 points. So the Ravens could have won it and could have made this game even better if they stole one in Kansas City. But focusing in on those final three chances in the red zone for the Ravens, right? And that comes up with this question that I will try to answer in this segment. The three chances that the Ravens had at the end, right? The first one, it was a sailed throw out of the back of the end zone towards the left side of it, if you're watching it on, you know, obviously your television, to Isaiah Likely, just Lamar sailing it out of bounds. Isaiah Likely looked like he was going to, his game was going to end right there, the way he fell on his arm, but he ultimately came back right for the last throw. But that was a throw that got away from Lamar. Some people say that it was an easier throw to make, you know, if he just places it anywhere else but where he did. But I think in the context of the game and everything like that, it seems easy, and I think Lamar just tried to make it a little bit too perfect, or just try to make it as least of a hard throw as he could, right, if that makes sense. He just tried to kind of sail it in there and put it up high enough for Isaiah Likely. He didn't want to have any chance left out there for the corner or somebody to make a, you know, pass breakup on it. He wanted to put it high enough for Isaiah Likely to go up and get it, but he just sailed it. He sailed it out of the back of the end zone. So that was their one chance, right? They're 0 for 1. Then, still with enough time remaining, they had another throw, and this one was the one that I thought the game was over because of the fact that Lamar, you know, takes the snap. He's back there moving around, looking for options. He kind of scrambles over to his right-hand side, and you see Zay Flowers come open in the back of the end zone, and you're thinking, you know, that's it, right? After you're watching the replay, like, Zay Flowers is wide open, like, probably 6 to 7 yards from the nearest defender in the back of the end zone. He sticks his hand up, telling Lamar, you know, to look over to him, and obviously looking at it in fast motion, once you see the replay, it looks like a really bad miss from Lamar. You know, he throws it behind him, Zay Flowers keeps running, and everyone's kind of just left there speechless. I thought the time ran out. I wasn't really looking at the clock, but there were still 4 seconds left, and they're very fortunate to have that, because if the game ends on that, it looks even worse on Lamar because of the fact that Zay Flowers was that wide open. But I would cut Lamar some slack on that throw. I feel like he was more in the right, looking at it more so, because if I remember correctly from the game and watching it live, it looked like there was a linebacker or somebody in the vicinity where Zay Flowers would have been running to, and Zay Flowers kept running. So if Lamar sort of leads him, tries to float it in there over the defender that's in front of Lamar Jackson, he might have an errant throw. He might throw an interception or something like that. So the window was there for Zay. If he stops moving like Lamar thought, that throw is probably right at his face, and the game's probably either going to end or we're going into overtime, right? But what was even crazier about that was that Lamar said that throw was going for Rashad Bateman, and I don't even remember where Rashad was on that play. But regardless of the fact, if Zay stops moving, he was catching that anyway, whether or not it was for Rashad or Zay, whatever it was going to be wide open. But Lamar obviously missed the throw. And now he's 0 for 2, but there's still 4 seconds left on the clock. And now comes the hardest throw that Lamar has to make to Isaiah Likely, right? He fits it somehow into that window. Perfect spot for Isaiah to catch it over the defenders. He does a great job of getting his feet down, but unfortunately that right big toe, the crown of his shoe, is just barely out of bounds. The game ends there, and it's a crusher for this Baltimore Ravens team. Now Lamar falls to 1-5 against Patrick Mahomes. The Ravens fall to 1-6 against the Kansas City Chiefs in their last 7 games, and Baltimore hasn't won in Kansas City since 2012, almost 13 years ago that happened, and it's obviously looking bad now. You look at this game, all the hype being built up around it, and a lot of that attention, a lot of the determining factors that were going to decide this game, apart from the Kelseys, the Rashee Rices of the world, the Xavier Worthies, the Derrick Henrys, it was all about these quarterbacks. And we talked about it leading up into this game, and how much of an important win this could have been for Lamar and why the pressure was on him over the Ravens. I'm pretty sure that was the question, whether there was more pressure on Lamar or on the Ravens as a team. And it's a similar question now because of the fact that we're talking about probably the 2 most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. Both are able to do unimaginable things on the football field. Lamar, you saw it a lot last night with his legs. His greatest virtue, his greatest difference maker is the ability to run. Now losing some of that weight, he looks very, very sleek out there. He looks very agile, very bouncy, and he was taking some hits that he kind of bounced off of, so it doesn't look like it's affecting his strength or his ability to take any hits. And he was just running past guys, almost like similar to Xavier Worthy, the way that he just accelerated past guys. Lamar was doing that from the quarterback spot. And then you have Patrick right on the other side doing great things more and more, just making the impossible look routine. The throws that he makes are just always on the money. Everything is just efficient with Patrick Mahomes, and both of them are right up there at the top of the mountain. Both of them have 2 MVPs in the NFL regular season, but the distinction starts to come in these big moments, right? In these big moments where you have to have it, especially when you're going up against another great quarterback. These duels that we have the pleasure of seeing, it always gets decided by who misses a throw, who messes up on one, who just slightly overthrows it, and it usually does happen to be Patrick Mahomes coming up on the right side of things, and that's what distinguishes him from the rest of the pack, right? Joe, Josh, Lamar, all great quarterbacks, but there's no question when we talk about the best being Patrick Mahomes, because when you have these moments, nobody has a doubt that he's going to come through, and that's, I think, where Lamar sort of, you still need to see it, and I don't like saying that because he does usually come through against other teams. He has such a great winning record against the rest of the NFL, but when it comes to the Chiefs, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, and the other team is like the Steelers or something, Lamar, it seems like when you have to have it, when you have the Chiefs, when you have Patrick in your grasps, whether or not it's getting ready to win the game or tie the game, something, always fails, something always falls short. And it's confusing, right? Because you look at Lamar just last night with his legs, almost 400 yards of total offense just himself. And with how spectacular he was, the Ravens are not in that game whatsoever if Lamar doesn't do what he does. If he doesn't go insane running the ball, making some pretty crazy throws to his credit. The Ravens aren't anywhere near the Chiefs in this game, and that's the positive side of having a quarterback like Lamar, right? You try to base everything around him. The game plan, the scheme, and everything like that is so solely based around Lamar, all the design runs and things like that, the RPOs, the quick throws and everything. It's great when you have that, when you are able to benefit from his abilities, right? But on the other side of it, it almost becomes like an over-reliance on it at times, and that's when you get this debate of whether or not you do put all the blame on Lamar, because he was the sole reason that the Ravens were in this game to begin with, doing everything, bailing them out, getting first downs, making it a nightmare for the Kansas City Chiefs defense. But when you do all of that, and then finally we get to the prove-it moment, we get to that big moment where you have 3 chances, right, to win this game or to tie this game, having Patrick Mahomes just sitting, watching on the sidelines. It's Lamar's show right now. He did so well, the Ravens did so well to execute that 2-minute drive, and now they have 3 chances, and to go 0 for 3 with those throws, it makes everybody, unfortunately, forget how the Ravens even got into that spot, because they didn't play well at all. It was a very disappointing performance, I would say, just because of all the uncertain factors on this team. The offensive line had a very rough start. I think Ronnie Stanley had 3 illegal formations just on himself, some false starts in there. It was very ugly to start, but even still, they were in that position to potentially win this game. And when you get into that moment, right, a lot of fans might be thinking, like, I don't know how we're in this spot, but we have a chance here. We're getting ready to potentially tie the game, and then you end up losing that. It's very disappointing because most fans didn't even expect to be there. Most analysts or anybody talking about this game didn't expect the Ravens to be in this position, just based on the fact that the Chiefs were looking a lot better than them in this game. But somehow we ended up here, and now that you have this golden opportunity where you're not playing great, but you're still in this game with the reigning Super Bowl champions, you have to make those throws, right? And it's an unfortunate circumstance to be in with Lamar, because again, they're not in this game without him, but also they don't win this game because of those throws that he didn't make, and that's the thing you need to get you up to this point. And sometimes when you get up until the end, the throws that he might not make, come back to bite you, and then you're left with just a very odd feeling of thinking that you were playing great, that you have this great quarterback, and Lamar is a great quarterback, I'm not questioning that, but you were so close even in a spot where you weren't, and then in the end, the guy that was doing everything for you, kind of let you down. And it's a weird juxtaposition to be in because, again, Lamar is right there, and I think other than Patrick, he's got all the personal accolades and everything like that, he's the closest comparison I think you can have to anybody on the level of talent and specialness that Patrick has. But to answer the question, is this loss more on Lamar or on the Ravens as a team? You could point out to the struggles that the offensive line had, but the defense played better than I thought they were. And I think just unfortunately, I think I would have to put this more on Lamar, because that's the standard when you're talking about having a player like this. If Joe don't make those throws also, they are going to get the same level of criticism. So Lamar being in that core group of just elite quarterbacks, you have to hold them up to that standard. And it is a weird way of going about it, just because he did everything for this Ravens offense. But again, the results of everything is what matters in the NFL, obviously. So people are going to look at that, those missed throws, especially when you have Patrick Mahomes on the other side. And if you switch the roles, if you give Patrick those opportunities, those exact windows that Lamar Jackson had to Isaiah Likely, to Zay Flowers, and even to, again, Isaiah Likely, Patrick is probably completing 2 out of 3 throws that Lamar unfortunately missed. So that's always going to be the difference. Patrick compared to Lamar, they're going to continue to be compared because they are 2 of the best in the NFL. That's what it comes to. Those are the margins that you're dealing with when you have a player like Lamar on your team. And is it fair, unfair? That's not really what this game is about. It's all based on the results and execution rather than being put or being analyzed in a fair way. It's more often than not going to be fair, and that just happens with the territory, the reputation, the resume that these quarterbacks have. They have to come through in these big moments when you have the Super Bowl champions teetering, and stealing a game at home would have been huge, obviously, for the head-to-head tiebreakers and things like that. But now, unfortunately, you start the season with a loss, and it's a brutal one because you were right there and you didn't even play very good. But it's something that they're just going to have to pick themselves up from. I don't know who they play next week, but I expect them to get their first one in the win column. But overall, just, like a tough loss for the Ravens. But I think most of it will just have to fall on Lamar because he is the Baltimore Ravens, right? They don't go anywhere without him. And when they usually play bad, he's usually at the heart of it. And you take that in the good, and you also have to take that in the bad, unfortunately. So that's the game last night. We could talk some more about a lot of different things, but we're going to have to move on and preview tonight's game with the Packers taking on the Eagles down there in Brazil. We're going to go over the latest news with each team, the matchups, and the key factors that I think will decide this game, as well as giving my predictions on tonight's winner. That is coming up right after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back in here, getting back to the action on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to now talk about a brand new game that we have kicking off in just about an hour and 15 minutes, I want to say it starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or 8:15, between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. It's 8:15, so an hour and 15 minutes to kick off just based on our live time. And it's the second game of the regular season tonight. Green Bay taking on the Eagles in Brazil, down in South America. The first ever NFL game down in that continent, but also obviously in Brazil. The game tonight is exclusively on Peacock for anybody wondering why they can't find the game or where the NFL is going to air this game. It's going to be exclusively on Peacock. So in case you didn't know that, there you go. Philadelphia is technically the home game in this game, obviously being played at a neutral site, but Philadelphia is considered the home team in this contest. And now, starting off with the Eagles and some of the news, additions, and departures that we can look forward to in this game. Starting on the injury front, no Devin White tonight for the Eagles. Unfortunately, he did not travel down to Brazil because of an ankle injury he suffered this week in practice. That means that Zach Braun and Kobe Dean will be most likely the inside linebackers, the starting inside linebackers for the Eagles. It'll be the first game for Saquon Barkley also for the Eagles as well. Weird circumstance having your first game be in a different continent, but that's the environment that we find ourselves in with Saquon and the Eagles. The first game also without Jason Kelce. Cam Jurgens will now be the starting center. And along those lines, Mekhi Becton, the former first round pick for the New York Jets, now on the Eagles, he is likely to start at guard for them this evening if everything goes according to plan based on how he has been performing in training camp. I expect to see him out there at right guard, and that is as a result of Cam Jurgens moving over to center from playing right guard last year. So Mekhi Becton could be starting a different path in his career now, because he was drafted to be an offensive tackle, but he's found a home there at guard for the Philadelphia Eagles, so that should be interesting on how he maneuvers and how they deploy him there. And also looking at some more of the new players that the Eagles will bring to them down in Brazil. You have C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back to them, Quinyon Mitchell projected to start at slot tonight, or we could see him get some reps on the outside as well. Jahan Dotson, traded over from the Commanders, will be making his debut tonight. And Bryce Huff, also coming over from the New York Jets in free agency this year for the Eagles. So that's all the pieces of news on any injuries, additions, and departures for them. No Devin White is going to be huge, but still a lot of anticipation with a lot of these new players. None more than Saquon Barkley. So that's what we got on the Philadelphia Eagles side of things. Then you look at the Packers, same thing. There's no real big injury news with them or any doubts going into tonight's game that I have been able to see. And talking about some of their new acquisitions in free agency, it doesn't get any bigger than Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney as well on the defensive side of the ball. Both were added in free agency. And then you look also as well at some of their departures, like John Runyon on the offensive line. They feel pretty confident on how they've been able to replace, John Runyon on this offensive line, but that is still something that they're going to have to keep an eye on, because John Runyon is a very good player, obviously a monumental piece to that offensive line. Now he's in New York, and how that offensive line now operates should be something to keep in mind. And talking some more about Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, both guys are going to bring a lot to this team on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Josh coming in to essentially replace Aaron Jones, and I think you're going to get about the same workload, but I'm going to also keep in mind the idea that A.J. Dillon will not be playing at all this year. He is on the season-ending IR with, I believe, a neck injury, so how many carries Josh Jacobs gets, how many they deploy to a backup running back will also be fascinating to follow in the course of not just this game, but also the entire regular season. And Xavier McKinney is an underrated addition just because I think he has great potential to really make an impact on any defense. And he did make one with the New York Giants, but obviously a lot of people overlooked it just because the Giants might not have been performing up to the level of a player like Xavier McKinney, so you don't really get to hear about him as much. Now, with the Packers, very much a contending team, I think he could be a standout player for them. I really do. Him alongside Jair Alexander will be one of the better duos in a secondary, environment in the NFL. And then also, the Packers have the quantities at wide receiver, at the weapons for Jordan Love. Now it's just about building around it, and we're going to see a bunch of those guys on the offensive side of the ball for the Packers in tonight's game. Dontavion Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Jalen Reed, all those guys are going to be. Christian Watson is the other one. All those guys should be healthy and ready to go, and I'll be also interested to see how they're looking now in a second year, now having a lot more people know who they are, quite honestly, and preparing for them, how they're able to deal with that and, bring that up into this big year now where they're looked at more as the favorites rather than the underdogs that people just count out because they're extremely young. That's a different environment now, a different area that they're going to have to move through. But speaking of moving on, we're going to talk about now the matchups and the keys to this game. There's quite a few of them that you look at and that I'm really going to keep an eye on as well throughout the rest of tonight's game. And we'll probably talk about it on Monday with how this game turns out. But one of the bigger ones is the new Philadelphia O-line and going up against the somewhat different Green Bay Packers defensive line. The Eagles, like we mentioned before, Cam Jurgens moving over to center. Huge change from an exchange standpoint, right? Cam Jurgens probably doesn't snap the ball exactly like Jason Kelce does, so making sure there's no issues there. The snaps are clean. No problems happen with that because that's the last thing you want to have problems with, obviously. how they operate that. Mekhi Becton, like I mentioned before, at guard for them, how those two guys operate in their new roles, and Green Bay Packers, how they're able to, make an impact on this new offensive line for the Eagles. A lot will change with Jason Kelce not being there in terms of calling out certain alignments, certain assignments as well. Not having his veteran presence in there should be something to keep an eye on as well. Then you look at the next level on that defense. You look at Nakobe Dean and Zach Braun going up against Jordan Love. The quarterback of the defense, depending on who it is, Zach Braun or Nakobe Dean, calling the plays in response to Jordan Love and how they audible out of those plays, how they play off of each other, how one side counters the other. It's going to be super interesting because we're talking about some young players on each side, and also, it's just that chess match within the entirety of the game that ultimately makes a big difference, right? When you have a great quarterback going up against, the linebackers calling the plays and whatnot, it makes a big difference when you shift the protection alignment or you audible to a different play. How does the defense, audible on your audible and things like that. How whoever the quarterback is on the defense for the Eagles, how they respond to Jordan Love should be an interesting matchup to go on throughout the entire game. Then also, you look at the Green Bay Packers wide receivers, all four of them going up against that new Philadelphia Eagles secondary, how they line up. Does Darius Slay follow? Who does he match up against more tonight out of all those four guys? Quinyon Mitchell, how many looks does he get? Do they try to target him because he's a rookie? Along those lines, CJ Gardner-Johnson, how he moves around the backfield in the secondary, how does that affect Jordan Love? Trying to get the ball to these guys. It's going to be super fascinating how each coach maneuvers their pieces to try and get them in the best position possible. And along those lines, another matchup that I'm looking at is Matt LaFleur going up against Nick Sirianni, and also the coordinators, right? Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore making their debuts tonight for the Philadelphia Eagles. And on the other side, going up against Stenovich, the offensive coordinator for the Packers, and the new defensive coordinator for the Packers, Jeff Hafley, the head coach at Boston College over the last 4 seasons. He is now a new coach in the NFL, defensive coordinator for the Packers. How do they have their matchups? How does it all turn out? And which duo ends up being the victor in this matchup in tonight's game? And then also just looking at it similarly, how does this new Philadelphia Eagles defense overall look going into this matchup with Jordan Love, right? Very exciting offense going up against a relatively new defense with the Eagles, new coordinator, new everything, right? New scheme, new idea, and everything. Who comes out on top will be a big determinant in this game. How efficient does the Eagles offense look, right? With all their great all-pro weapons, A.J. Brown, Smitty, Saquon, Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert. How efficient do they look right off of the bat, trying to incorporate all these pieces, right? Because it looks great on paper. We saw it last night with Derrick Henry and this Ravens offense. But actually executing and knowing when to use what player is a lot harder than it looks. So how efficient they look right off of the bat will be huge. And also, I think tonight's game is going to be very offensive based, very heavy on the points, if you will. So the last key to this game will be which defense makes more stops, and also which one comes at the biggest moment, right? Because I feel like we're going to have a big moment like we had in last night's game, or a couple of them. You never know. So this new Eagles defense, are they able to muster up some stops, especially without Devin White, to stop Jordan Love? And similarly to this Packers defense, is there any way they can stifle all those great players that the Eagles have? It's going to be super fascinating to watch. And lastly, my prediction for tonight's game, I feel like it's similar to yesterday's game. I think the Eagles at this point in time have too many things to still figure out. It's all there on the wall. You're just trying to figure out where and how and when to use some of these pieces, whereas the Packers are coming into this game with really only Josh Jacobs being incorporated into their offense and some new additions on defense. But it's relatively the same. Head coach, coordinators, pretty much all the same. I think they're just a step ahead in terms of where they want to be, closer to their final form. So I think the Packers will just edge it out tonight. I'm going to say 27-21 will be the final score. Packers go 1-0 and the Eagles fall to 0-1. And also, the last thing I'll throw out is just my confidence in Matt LaFleur. I think is exceeding my confidence in Nick Sirianni. I think there's a lot of talks around Nick Sirianni in terms of the coaching, his relationship with Jalen Hurts. You never hear any of that with Matt LaFleur, so I think just my confidence in the coaching also will make a difference in tonight's game. But regardless of that, it's going to be an awesome game. I hope everything turns out well down there in Brazil for the NFL's sake and just the sake of this game also. But that game is set to kick off in about 45 or actually an hour. It's about to kick off in an hour here Eastern time, so we'll be tuning into that. But moving on to the last couple segments we have on today's show, we have what is holding up Dak Prescott's extension. There was a report on what could be the deciding factor on whether or not the Cowboys give Dak Prescott that extension. We're going to get into that. And then the last segment will just be running through the remainder of Week 1 matchups and picking who wins and who loses in the other 14 games that we have on Sunday and on Monday as well. So we'll be right back with both of those topics. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and just going away from the games that are obviously taking place tonight, the game taking place tonight and the game from last night, we have a story here that I thought was pretty interesting to bring up regarding Dak Prescott and his contract extension, because that has seemed to have just fizzled out right now, talking about where the Cowboys stand right now with Dak, how optimistic they are. Usually when we come down to it with guys like Lamar, even with the Steelers also getting Pat Freiermuth signed today as well, Cam Hayward recently in the last few days, Trent Williams, you start hearing things about teams getting these extensions done. I also failed to mention that it was funny because it flew over my head today that Jalen Ramsey got extended with the Dolphins. It just completely escaped my mind, and now becoming the highest paid cornerback based on average salary per year, a new 3-year, $72 million deal, just jumping and taking all the attention away from Pat Surtain, I thought was pretty funny. But, these extensions that are getting done now, you start to hear more and more about it because we're right here. The season's already underway, so you think you'd hear more about what's going on with these extensions, but it hasn't really been the case for Dak and the Cowboys. And it doesn't look like they're gonna agree to much at this point in time. If I had to, make a decision on that, it looks like right now this will be the final year in Dak's contract, obviously, and I don't know what's going to happen after this year, next offseason, whether or not they come to an agreement or not. But it's not an ideal situation to head into the last the last year of the contract for your starting quarterback and, approach it this way, especially for the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, right? You want to secure him for how big the Cowboys are and how much pressure there is on them each and every year. To have doubts around the quarterback position is something that is just going to be talked about throughout the entire regular season. And that's where we bring up this recent report. According to the Athletic's Diana Rossini, talking about those doubts and everybody talking about Dak Prescott, the wait seems to go on with this extension for Dak Prescott because of the uncertainty from the Dallas Cowboys with having Dak as the long-term answer at quarterback, right? Not how much they're going to pay him, like some may assume, right? There's been some pretty astounding numbers being thrown out there in terms of contract and how much money Dak's going to be making, right? You're hearing 60, 65 million, things like that, and that, rightly so, you think is what's holding up this deal. But according to Diana Russini, it seems to be the fact that there is some doubts within the Dallas Cowboys organization whether or not Dak is going to be this answer to change the narrative that they have been facing recently in terms of playoff success and things like that. And what Diana Russini actually said was the following. She said, Prescott's looking for a long-term commitment from Dallas, so the holdup here is really the belief from the Dallas Cowboys. This is the guy who's won a lot of games, but is that enough? Winning's not enough for Jerry Jones. We know this. They want to do more, and it just seems like the Dallas Cowboys are uncertain of whether or not Dak has the capability of being that quarterback to really put him in a position to win Super Bowls, and that seems to be what is holding up this deal right now, not the astounding, extraordinary amount of money that they're going to give him, that someone's going to give Dak Prescott, just based on what he does in the regular season. He's going to get paid, but it looks like the Cowboys are coming to this breakthrough thought that, is this really who we want to commit our future to going forward, just based on recent results? You look at this statement now and you can't help but sort of agree with them, right? You look at Dak's 73-41 regular season record, and that's great and all, but a 2-5 playoff record and 3 losses at home really start to make this a sour tasting situation for the Cowboys and Dak, and it really makes you double think everything, any sort of decision that you're going to make, because this is a game-changing, future trajectory shifting kind of decision that the Cowboys find themselves in. And to that point, I can sort of understand why they're taking so long, right? We've been on here on constant episodes talking about what's taking so long, but this is a huge decision that they have to make, and it ultimately comes to the question I want to pose you guys of, now that where we are in this situation with Dak and the Cowboys, are we just ultimately in a lose-lose situation for the Dallas Cowboys, whether or not they extend or decide to move on from Dak? Is it a lose-lose situation either way? And by that I mean it's that it seems like Dallas has no problems obviously paying Dak what he wants, apparently, based on this report. So why this is a lose-lose situation for me is that, yes, it's justifiable to have that doubt in Dak Prescott now, because you're done seeing the performances in the regular season. We know that you can do that. With who the Cowboys are and how much they mean to the NFL in terms of global, recognition, everybody knows that logo, right? The star, how much pressure there is on them. I'm actually glad to see that they're actually trying to make a difference now. It's the biggest move, potentially, that they're making in terms of improving or reacting and having some sort of consequence to the recent performances in the playoffs. But I think, to kind of defend Dak here on the other side of things, I think too much almost goes into Dak at times. And by that I mean I think almost too much pressure, and I think too much of the blame really goes on Dak Prescott at times for starters, right? This is ultimately a team game, and we've talked a lot about the quarterbacks in today's show and how if you have that guy, the guy, elite level talent, they do a lot to mask these issues. And I don't think Dak is necessarily one of the top 3, top 4 guys that we have in the NFL, but still, based on performances in the regular season, you expect more. But to that same sentiment, I think that Patrick or Lamar would say that they couldn't do a lot of what they do. A lot of their performances aren't what they say they are because they have guys around them like Travis, obviously, or a fantastic defense led by Steve Spagnuolo. for Lamar Jackson. A great head coach, great offensive coordinator, Derrick Henry now in there with them, having guys like Isaiah Likely, Roquan Smith on the other side of the ball. They do what they do. They're able to have the leeway that they do and go out there and try things, create magic, because they have a great supporting staff around them. But even so, most of what the success is on the field is based on them, right? And a lot of it is based on Dak, but in that same sentiment, I still think that a lot of the blame goes on Dak, and he is painted in a very bad light, but I think not enough goes on this defense for the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll explain why. I feel like the defense isn't getting enough heat like Dak Prescott does, and does Dak put him in bad spots in the playoffs? Yes, he does, but not on every single drive of every single game that they end up losing or that they end up, being in a close game with, right? With how good they've been talked about and how good they've been projected to be in the regular season as well for the Dallas Cowboys defense, I have to expect more out of them in the playoffs. And what I mean by that is you look at the last 4 games for this Dallas Cowboys defense, they've allowed 477 rushing yards total in those last 4 games, 143 to Aaron Jones in the last game where they got smacked by the Packers. Then also, they've been outscored 104 to 92 in those games as well. Michael Parsons, great player, great pass rusher, one of the best in the NFL, only has 1 sack in their last 4 playoff games. I don't want to hear that he's getting all the attention, because that comes with any great defense, right? Miles gets all of it, TJ gets all of it, Aaron Donald got all of it, but they even still made plays along, those lines, along all those circumstances they've showed up. And Micah only having 1 sack in all those games is something that has to be pointed out. Also, they've allowed over 1,000 passing yards allowed in those 4 games as well, with 11 touchdowns on top of that. Why this situation is a lose-lose now is because you still have all those same circumstances and those same situations heading into this year. Whether you decide to keep Dak or not, the team hasn't really changed from last year to this year. You brought back Mike McCarthy. It's basically the same defense, just with a new defensive coordinator now. The offense is still pretty much the CeeDee Lamb show. You probably got worse at the running back position, and your offensive line, there are still some questions with it heading into this new year. So why is this situation a lose-lose? It's because if you move on from Dak, it's a losing situation, because you don't know who your quarterback is going to be. Probably Cooper Rush, maybe. I don't know who else they get, but it's not going to be as good as Dak Prescott, right? So that's a loss. On the other side, if you decide to keep Dak, the doubt is already there, according to this report. You've already planted that seed of doubt in your head. So if you keep Dak and have basically the same team, these doubts, these expectations are still going to be there, but the results are probably going to be the same thing, right? Insanity is doing the exact same thing every time and thinking that something's going to change. You keep Dak, obviously you have a quarterback, a great one, but the results and expecting anything to change is insane, because you keep the same team, and now the doubts are out there that the Cowboys are feeling a little bit squeamish of having Dak as the long-term answer. Those doubts are already out there, as if they weren't already, right, to be fair. But now you have those doubts, and you're still going to pay him $65 million per year. That's insane. That's insane to do, but it's the circumstance they've put themselves in. It's a lose-lose situation in my mind because of that. If you keep Dak, that's great, but the results aren't really going to change. And next year, if you move on from Dak, they could change, but they could change in a very bad way, right? You could just not be competing at all, and then that's a whole different realm of expectations for such a well-known, well-renowned organization, franchise. It's not where you want to be. So I'm super interested to know how it's going to all pan out. But right now, a lot more doubts and a lot more questions, it seems like, for the Cowboys with their quarterback. And that'll be that segment. We'll see if that deal ultimately gets done. But for right now, we have one more segment to get to. A last segment here to predict the wins and losses for the rest of the Week 1 slate over the weekend. We're going to go through each game, and I'm just going to basically pick who's going to win in each of the next 14 remaining games of Week 1. So that is coming up really quick right after this break. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just quickly going over the rest of the Week 1 matchups and seeing who's going to win and who's going to lose. We're going to predict the winners of the next 14 games after tonight's game. There's going to be 14 games left all the way through Monday. We're going to go through them and predict who's going to end up being the winner in those contests. And we're going to start off just quickly here with the Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Steelers traveling to Atlanta to face the Falcons. A lot going into this matchup. Arthur Smith going back to Atlanta to where he was the head coach in last year. Who's going to start at quarterback now for the Steelers seems to be a legitimate question with Russell Wilson tweaking that calf injury that he had. I just saw a report, not even kidding, like a minute or two ago that from Ian Rappaport that according to him, it looks like Justin Fields is going to start. So whether that ends up being the case or Russell Wilson plays, it still seems to be a mystery. And on the other side, the Falcons introducing their new quarterback, Kirk Cousins, into their team, this new season, this new era, also with Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson. Who is going to win this matchup? It's going to be closer probably than a lot of people think. The Steelers defense got better. The Falcons defense got better. Falcons at home to open up this year. I feel like this quarterback thing with the Steelers is really, I wanted Russ to start, but now having Justin Fields start, and it's really throwing me off now. Let's go. I swear I had Pittsburgh winning, but I think I'm going to change it to the Falcons winning just because you can't have this quarterback question just not knowing who's going to start days before the start of the regular season. So I had Pittsburgh on my sheet, but we're going to go with the Falcons winning this one at home. I think they're just geared up to finally show everyone what they have in store for everyone. So we're going to go with the Falcons at home winning that one. Then just moving down the line, we have the Cardinals traveling to Buffalo, taking on the Bills again at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I think this one's a bit easier. I think Buffalo will win this game. People are high on the Cardinals, high on Kyler Murray coming back with Marvin Harrison Jr., but even still, I feel like Josh is one of those quarterbacks in that realm with Lamar and Patrick, obviously, where he can single-handedly cover up for a lot of their mishaps and, bad plays. And I think there could be some of that early on, like there is with most teams, but they have a new look offense coming in. They don't know who their number one target is going to be, how this defense is going to look now. Even still, I think with Josh, when you have one of those guys, I think more often than not they come through, especially at home. The Cardinals traveling all the way across the country in Buffalo. I think it's a tall task to ask for in Week 1. So I'm going to go with Buffalo taking that one over the Arizona Cardinals. Then continuing to move down the line, the Patriots traveling to Cincinnati at 1 p.m. Eastern Time again. another easy one. I think the Bengals will win this one. I saw that T. Higgins was doubtful for this game because of a hamstring injury. That was some pretty surprising news to me. Jamar Chase, also unsure of whether or not he's going to play. He had some pretty interesting quotes to say today on his contract. He said that he views it as today, being the deadline to get a new deal done. And, we still have a couple hours left here, Eastern time. We have about 5 to 4 hours left. Maybe Jamar gets a contract late, like Tua got or Jordan Love did a couple weeks ago. But if he gets that contract, he also said that he is likely to play this season without that contract. So it looks like he could play, but how much he does in this game will be huge because he's not coming off of a lot of practice. And also, if you don't have T. Higgins there and potentially a limited Jamar, it could make it close. But, Joe Burrow, just like Josh Allen, he is one of those guys. So the Patriots just starting off here. I feel like Cincinnati will take this one at home. Then the Vikings travel to New York to take on the New York Giants. Justin Jefferson back, hopefully healthy for the entire season for my fantasy team's sake, playing the New York Giants in New York. New quarterback also for the Vikings, Sam Darnold, officially will be the quarterback this year. Interesting quarterback battle, right? Daniel Jones versus Sam Darnold. Nobody probably expected that to be the case in week 1, but here we are. The Vikings coming in with a new team. On offense, they're going to be without TJ Hawkinson. They have Aaron Jones. How much is he used right off of the bat? Just again, how does Sam Darnold look as the starting quarterback here? Getting another opportunity and a great offense with Kevin O'Connell. I feel like a lot of quarterbacks could be successful with him. Hopefully Sam Darnold does the same. With the Giants, a lot of rummaging through a lot of just extracurricular things this offseason. So I don't think they'll be able to get everything in order just yet. I like the Vikings' chances here going to New York. Funny enough, I saw an interview with Justin Jefferson, how he was still a little bit salty that the Giants knocked him out of his first ever playoff appearance. So don't be surprised if Justin Jefferson has a day against the Giants, and I think that'll be enough for the Vikings to win that game. Then we have Tennessee at Chicago. Two young quarterbacks going at it. Two very new teams on either side. A lot of new pieces with the Titans, a lot of new pieces with the Bears. In Chicago, a lot of excitement in that town for the first time in a long time with Caleb. All their offensive weapons, their defense is looking great. Tennessee coming into this game as well. It looks like DeAndre Hopkins is going to play alongside Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, Will Levis. How does he look in this new system under Brian Callahan? I saw a crazy record that rookie quarterbacks are like 1-22-1 in their last 24 starts. So because of that, I'm a stickler for things like that. I'm a big believer in those records. No rookie quarterback hardly ever wins in their first game, something like that. So I'm gonna go with Tennessee based off of that fact. Chicago's a great team. I have them in the playoffs this year, but it's going to be a rough start, I think, just getting everything in order. Give me the Titans in that game. Then we look at the Panthers at the New Orleans Saints. Similar situation here with the Panthers. They're essentially starting over again from last year. From starting over last year, they're basically doing the same thing. I like their team better. I like Dave Canales and what he can bring to this team, but New Orleans has a better roster overall. They have better players, and they're at a more experienced level in the Superdome. I like New Orleans to win this one at home. Then the Jaguars at Miami, two quarterbacks that got massive extensions this year. A big debate here at GSMC, the sports network, between these two quarterbacks. It's going to be a great conversation on Monday on who ends up winning this game. But who I think is going to win this game, I think that the Dolphins will ultimately win this game. I like their team better. I like their offense better. And I might even say that I like Tua a little bit better, just how he fits into this offense. Mike McDaniel, I really like his ideas and how his offense is run. And their defense also is not as bad to the point where they're getting overlooked. They have Ramsey. I like Jalen Phillips. He's coming off of an injury. Once they get Bradley Chubb back as well, they're going to be a good team. Javon Holland is a very underrated player as well. I like what they're doing on this side of the ball. I like how they've built up this roster, and I have them winning the division. I think it starts here. Give me the Dolphins in this matchup. Then Houston and the Indianapolis Colts, the last game in the 1 o'clock window. Texans making their debut with this new all-pro, all-star roster that they have. How everything comes together, similar to the Eagles, similar to the Ravens as well, like we talked about on this show. But the difference here is that they really have like two new guys, and I feel like they're very, compared to the Eagles, because they have a new identity coming in with Kellen Moore, and similar to the Ravens as well, like I said, with Derek, very similar impact that he can make with Lamar. I think the Texans already have an identity established with Slowick, their offensive coordinator, and Nico and Tank and CJ. I like their chances on the road against the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson, I haven't seen enough out of him yet. I think he could be good, but I just would like to see more out of him. The Texans start this year 1-0. Then into the 4 o'clock windows, we have the Raiders taking on the Chargers. I like, as crazy as it may sound, I like the Chargers winning in this game. The quarterback position for the Raiders is a questionable one with Justin Herbert at home. The way that the Chargers will try to play this season, I like what they have going for them in their roster right now with Jim Harbaugh, how they're trying to establish the run. This is one of my more surprising picks, the ones I try to pick an underdog, if you will say. I'm pretty sure they are the underdog in this game. So I'd like the Chargers to surprise this Raiders team on the road with Gardner Minshew coming in there. They'll take the win at home in Los Angeles. Then we look at this Broncos game with the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. I like Seattle winning this one. I like Mike McDonald as their new head coach. There's too many new beginnings with this Broncos team. New rookie quarterback coming in, obviously. There's a lot of holes on this defense that I think will stand out a little bit more than they did, obviously, in the preseason. And I like Seattle, what they have going for them. You know, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, obviously. Geno, in a prove-it year for him. Their defense is they have good players on their defense with Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen as well. I think they have more to get them over the line at home. Then the Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns, two quarterbacks that are under enormous amounts of pressure in each of their respected, situations. Give me the Cleveland Browns because I just finished talking about the Cowboys and how they're in a lose-lose situation. I don't think it helps traveling into Cleveland against that defense. No way. Not in week one. I think the Browns take this one. Then the final three here, the Commanders taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like Jaden Daniels. I'm hopping on the bandwagon of the Commanders. I have been on it for a while now. I have them finishing second in the division. I think it starts here. They get a big road win in Tampa. Dan Quinn, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels showing out in his first contest, making a statement, winning on the road. I like the Commanders in this game. Then the Rams and the Detroit Lions, one of the more anticipated ones. In Sunday Night Football, again, a rematch of last year's playoff game where the Lions won that game. I think this time the Los Angeles Rams win it. In Matthew Stafford, he gets a second chance to come back to Detroit, and you don't think he's going to win. He's going to be more motivated to win this game. They only won last year, the Lions did, by 1 point. I think the Rams, they've reinvented themselves here a little bit, or they've brought in some more weapons like Blake Corum, some more defensive pieces on that side of the ball. I think they're going to be uber motivated. Matthew Stafford, I can't have him going 0-2 back-to-back years against his old team. I like the Rams to surprise everyone on Sunday Night Football. And then lastly, one of the bigger games as well, the Jets traveling to San Francisco on Monday Night Football. As much as I want to see a surprise win by the Jets, I think it would throw a lot of people off. I think San Francisco will take it. I think traveling across the country, Rodgers' record against the 49ers isn't great anyway. They also have a lot of new pieces, a lot of ways to figure out this offense still, its true identity. Give me the San Francisco 49ers. They're very relieved to have Williams and Brandon Ayuk back. I think they'll take this one. They'll take care of business at home over the New York Jets. And with that being said, that wraps up today's show. We went through all the games. I got my picks in there. I'll come back to this episode and see how much I got right, and we'll talk about it on Monday. But for right now, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Go out, go enjoy this game. It's set to start in about half an hour. But also, please remember to tune in to all the live shows of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast each weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. I'll see you guys back here on Monday to recap all the games, talk about storylines, and all the latest headlines around the NFL with myself, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you back here on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to